Hello and welcome back once again. It's been a little minute, but we are back and we are ready to go over some more principles of microeconomics. With that in mind, before we begin, if you are not in my class already, may I suggest my book, A Step-by-Step Guide to the Principles of Microeconomics, which will help you answer many of the types of questions that you have in your own economics course. Of course, if you are not in my class, there's a pretty good chance that you won't be covering the material that we're going to be covering today, which is information economics. And so why don't we just go ahead and get started. So far in this course, everything that we've done, we have been looking at areas where we know what's going to happen, right? Where if we're making a decision, we're thinking about buying one thing or another, or selling one thing or another, we know what the consequences of our decision is going to be. Like even when we looked at game theory, right? We knew what was going to happen. We did the whole tree thing. We worked backwards in order to figure out, well, if we're going to make a decision, we need to know what the consequence of our decision is going to be before we can make it, right? However, that's not entirely realistic. There are lots of situations in the world where we have to make a decision without actually knowing what the consequence of our decision is going to be. Right? Lots of situations in which we only have partial information about the outcomes of what is going to happen. Okay? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is areas where we only have partial information. We don't know what's going to happen. Right? There's something hidden about it from us. So we're not, if we think about stuff we've done so far, where if we're going to buy a good, we know what our marginal value of that good is going to be. And we know exactly what it's going to provide to us. When we make strategic decisions, we know exactly, what people are going to do because we know what their best responses are. We know what our best responses are, and we can predict things pretty well. Now, one way in which this, partial information pops up a lot of the time is when we're talking about risk, right? There are lots of decisions that are risky to one degree or another. Right? A pretty obvious example is a lottery ticket, right? When you buy a lottery ticket, you don't know how much value that lottery ticket is going to bring you, right? It could, be a loser, probably is, and in that case, it will bring you relatively little marginal value. Okay, but also it could be a winner. You could make millions of dollars. There's some possibility that lottery ticket will provide a lot of utility for you or a lot of value for you. So when you are buying it, you're making your decision of whether or not to buy that lottery ticket, even though you only have partial information about the value that lottery ticket is going to give you. And yet you still have to make a decision. You still have to choose whether to buy that ticket or not. Okay, and that's an example of something that's risky. There are other ways in which partial information comes into play, right? It could be that you don't even know your own preferences, right? We've been talking about, you make your decisions on the basis of how much you like a thing versus how much you'd prefer to keep the money that you would be spending on it. However, you might not even know how much you'd like a thing, right? Before you've gone to visit, say, Germany, you don't know how much you would enjoy a trip to Germany. I can give you an item that you might be interested in buying, and you probably would not know how much value that item would give you until you've tried it out for yourself. Quick, think, what's your valuation on a rhinestone picture frame? Right, you probably never thought about that before, and so it would take you a second to figure out, well, how much do I actually value this at? And if you were forced to make a decision of whether or not to buy a rhinestone picture frame at a given price, you'd have to base your decision partially on partial information. You don't know what your valuation of that thing is. So this also pops up in things like job interviews, right? There are some situations in which one person has information and another does not. Okay, if you go out for a job interview and the person who is interviewing you, they want to figure out how good is this person? Do I want to hire them? But they can't just say, well, are you a good worker? Because everyone would just say yes, right? You as the employee, you have a better idea of how good of a worker you are than your employer does, than your potential employer does, right? And yet that's some information that you have, but they don't. And they have to make the decision of who to hire on the basis of their partial information of only knowing a little bit about you. Now that's an example of something where somebody knows something and somebody else does not, okay? That's something we're going to cover a little bit more next time. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on the risk side of things, right? We're going to make a decision about something, not knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be, okay? Now, the way that we're going to address these sorts of questions is we're going to use something called expected utility. Okay, utility is a term that we've come up with a couple of times before, and basically it's just sort of a measure of satisfaction. The more utility you have, the happier you are. right? If you want to maximize your economic surplus, that's the same thing as saying you want to maximize your utility, okay? But we're not just going to talk about utility here. We're going to talk about something called expected utility, okay? Because we don't know what utility we're actually going to get, right? Because we're in a risky situation. But we can talk about the kind of utility we might expect to get, right? When we go and buy that lottery ticket, well, if we're talking about utility as a measure of satisfaction, if that lottery ticket is a loser, that's not going to bring us too much satisfaction. But if that lottery ticket is a winner, that's going to bring us a lot of utility, a lot of satisfaction. So when we're trying to judge how good of an idea is it to buy that lottery ticket, well, we need to think about how much utility do we expect to get from that lottery ticket. So expected utility. Now, if you've ever taken a statistics course before, if you've run into the term expected value, it's going to be very similar to expected utility. Okay? The only thing is that instead of calculating the expectation of value, we're going to calculate the expectation of utility. Okay? So let's start with a basic example. Let's start with a coin flip. Let's say that somebody has come to you and they've offered you a bet. If you pay them $1, they will flip a coin. Okay? And depending on what that coin flip turns up, they will pay you a certain amount of money. Okay? If it comes up heads, they will give you $2 back. Right? You paid them $1, they'll give you back 2. If it comes up tails, nothing. They'll keep your $1 and they'll walk away. All right? So the question is, should you take this bet? Now, this is a risky decision, right? You have to decide whether or not to, buy that coin flip before you know what the outcome of the coin flip is going to be. It's a risky situation. So to figure this out, we're going to use the concept of expected utility. Now, in order to do this, we need to think about how satisfied would we be, how much utility would we have in the different possible outcomes here. Okay? If we're talking about the expected utility of flipping this coin, there are 2 possible outcomes that we could get if we flip it. Either it's going to come up heads, which will give us the $2, or it will come up tails and give us the $0. So in order to use expected utility, well, all we need to do is take those 2 outcomes and put some utility values on them. And then we can calculate out the expected utility of how much utility we expect to get by flipping this coin. So here's what we're going to write out. We're going to start out thinking, okay, what are the possible outcomes that we could have? Okay. And we're going to think about what is the utility, what is our utility value of each of those outcomes. And then finally, we're going to put the probability of getting each of those outcomes. Okay, so we have our 2 different outcomes. We could end up with $0 or we could end up with $2. Okay, simple enough. How about utility? Let's say that if we get that $0 outcome, we're going to give that a value of 0. Okay, 0 utility, we're going to get 0 points from that outcome. What if we get the $2? Okay, well let's put a utility value on that as well. Let's say that that's an 18. I'm making these numbers up here, but the basic idea is, what's our satisfaction rating on getting that $2? And we're going to say that we get an 18 out of that. Now we got to just fill in what's the probability of getting each of these outcomes. Well, we're talking about a coin flip here, so there's a half chance of getting each of them. So I'm going to put a half up here and a half down here. Great, so we have our table written out. Now we can calculate our expected utility. The steps to getting expected utility, pretty straightforward. We multiply the probabilities by the utilities, and then we add it together. Right? We have a half chance to get 0 utility, we got a half chance to get 18 utility, so we just are basically averaging out those 2 options, right? Well, multiplying the probabilities by the utilities and then adding them all together. It's basically sort of averaging things out, okay? So let's do that here. So what's the expected utility of flipping this coin? Expected utility of the coin flip. All right, so we're going to multiply the probabilities by the utilities. So we got first probability is 1/2. Going to multiply that by the utility of 0. And we're going to add together that with the probability of the $2 outcome, which is 1/2, times the utility that we get from that outcome, which is 18. So that's the expected utility of this coin flip. If we calculate this out further, a half times 0 is 0, a half times 18 is 9, and so our expected utility is 9. The expected utility of flipping this coin is 9 utility. Okay? Now, when we're trying to figure out then, well, should we flip the coin? All we got to do is compare the expected utility of flipping the coin to the expected utility of turning down the offer. And if we say that the expected utility of just keeping our dollar is 10, that we would derive 10 units of utility from keeping our dollar, well, 10 is better than 9, so we're going to go ahead and turn this offer down. Okay, it's going to be less than 10, which is the utility from our $1 outcome. You're just keeping our dollar. And so we turn it down. Right? We could calculate out the expected utility in any other way, right? It doesn't have to be 1/2 and 1/2. Let's say instead of a coin flip, it's a die roll, and you get 0 back unless you roll a 6. But if you roll a 6, then you get $2 back. We can calculate that out the expected utility there as well, okay? So we have 2 outcomes still, and so we multiply the probabilities. The probability of getting nothing back is 5/6, right? Because we get nothing back if it's anything between 1 and 5, times our utility of that of 0. And then add to it the 1/6 chance of rolling our 6 and getting a utility of 18. Okay, and that's going to give us 0 plus 1/6 times 18 is 3, which is 3. Okay, obviously that's a lot worse because the odds are a lot worse in that case, right? Instead of a 1/2 chance of getting the $2, it's only a 1/6 chance. That's not good at all, right? So, but we can calculate out, the expected utility in the exact same steps, no matter what the probabilities are. Every single time, we just take the utility, multiply it by the probability, and then add them all up. Add up all the outcomes, all the potential outcomes. And there we have it. There's expected utility. So we've got this concept of expected utility, and we know how to calculate it. And you'll notice, in the case of the coin flip, we turned down the option to take that coin flip. And this is even though the coin flip was what is called a fair bet. And what's a fair bet? A fair bet is any bet where, on average, you get back what you put in. Right? So in this case, with the coin flip, you put in $1, and on average, you get back $1, right? Because half the time you get nothing, half the time you get 2. So on average, that averages out to $1. So you put in $1, on average, you get back out $1. That's a fair bet. But we turned it down, right? We turned it down because when we looked at the expected utility, it was only 9, but the utility from keeping our dollar was 10. So we decided to keep our dollar and not go for the gamble. This means that we are what's called risk averse, okay? A risk averse person is someone who turns down a fair bet, right? You're offered a fair bet, right? On average, you get back what you put in. And turning that down means that you are risk averse, right? Because, well, think about it, right? It's a fair bet. You're not losing anything on average, and yet you turned it down because you said, well, this is too risky for me, right? I'd rather go with the safe option of just keeping the dollar. I know what that's going to be like, instead of the risky option of maybe getting back nothing and maybe having $2. So we avoided that risk, which made us risk averse. Now you can't, there's not just risk aversion, there's other options as well, right? You could be risk loving, which is that you'd accept fair bets, and maybe some worse bets too. Right? What do I mean by worse bets? Well, a worse bet than fair is one that, you put in on average, let's say $1, or you put in $1, and on average you get back a little bit less than $1. So the lottery is a good example of this. If you spend $1 on the lottery every single week, on average, you'll get back a little bit less than $1, right? That's a bet that's not in your favor. And so if you're accepting that bet, if you are going out and buying lottery tickets, that suggests that you are risk loving, okay? Risk averse person would turn down a fair bet. Risk loving person would accept a fair bet, and maybe even a bet that's a little bit outside, and the odds are not in their favor, okay? And those aren't the only two options. We could also have someone who is risk neutral. Someone who's risk neutral would accept a fair bet, but no worse. So a risk-neutral person might accept the coin flip, which is a fair bet, but they would not buy a lottery ticket because the lottery ticket is not in their favor, right? So we got three different kinds of people here, and the same person could be the different kinds of people on different days of their lives, right? But we have the risk-averse who would turn down a fair bet. We have the risk-neutral who would accept a fair bet, but never a bet that's not in their favor. And then we have the risk-loving who would accept a fair bet, and then also some bets that are not in their favor, right? They wouldn't take all bets necessarily, just some of the ones that are a little bit outside, not in their favor, okay? So we're sort of describing people and the different attitudes that people have towards risk. Some people really like risk, some people do not. But whichever they feel about risk, they can always think about how they value risks in the context of this expected utility. The reason why we got a risk-averse response to this coin flip is because the way that I wrote down the utility numbers made the person risk-averse. I could write down different numbers that would make them risk-loving or risk-neutral. The important thing is, it depends on how your satisfaction level, that's going to make you respond in different ways to risk. Let's take another quick example. So let's talk about phone plans. All right. So let's say that we have a phone plan that's 4 gigabytes, but sometimes we tend to go over. We tend to use a little bit more data than we're supposed to, and we have to pay an overage fee. So in half of all months, right, we use our phone plan. We're within our limits, and there's no problem. And if that happens, that's going to give us 100 utility that month. Now in a quarter of the months, we go over. Right, we have to pay an overage fee. And when we pay that overage fee, instead of having a utility of 100, we only have a utility of 80. And now in the remaining quarter of all months, not only do we go over once, we go over twice, and we have to pay 2 overage fees. And that is going to be no fun at all, and that will give us a utility of 40. Okay? So the question is, should we stick with this plan that we have right now, which is risky, or should we switch to a plan that we never go over on, that's safe, but it costs more money every single month, and so we have to take the hit on utility there as well. So we're going to calculate expected utility of sticking with our risky plan. So just like last time, we're going to have our outcomes. We're going to have our utility from each outcome, and we're going to have the probability of each outcome. So we have 3 different possibilities here. We could stay within our limits. We could stay within our 4 gigabyte limit. That's going to give us a utility of 100. And as we've determined, this happens 1/2 of the time. Okay? Then we have the possibility that we go up to 6 gigabytes. We pay 1 overage fee. That's going to take us down to a utility of 80. And that happens 1/4 of the time. Finally, we sometimes go up to 8 gigabytes, paying 2 overage fees. That gives us a utility of 40. And that also happens 1/4 of the time. Okay? Let's calculate out our expected utility of sticking with this plan. Same approach as before. We multiply the probabilities by the utilities and add them all up. So first, we have our 1/2 times 100, right? 1/2 times 100. We're going to add that to 1/4 times 80. And then we're going to add that to 1/4 times 40. That's our expected utility of sticking with this plan. We simplify this out. 1/2 times 100 is 50, plus 1/4 times 80 is 20, plus 1/4 times 40 is 10. If we add that all up, we get an expected utility of 80. Okay? We can then compare this to the alternative of switching to the more expensive plan that we never go over, which has a monthly utility of 90. 90 is better than 80, so it sounds like in this case we're going to want to switch to that more expensive plan. Right? We evaluated the risks. We used expected utility to evaluate how much we like taking that risk, and then we compared it to our safe alternative, and in this case we decided that the safe alternative was better than the risk. Now this is the important way that people tend to approach uncertain outcomes. And it's not just people making decisions, right? You can think about, governments making decisions. Governments have to make policy not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And so they're going to consider things like this. They'll think, well, what's the probability of this outcome? How much would we like that potential outcome? And we'll, evaluate all of our possible alternatives using this expected utility approach. Now, one place where this comes up, especially in everyday life, is in search. Okay? There's a lot of things in life that we have to search for. And the question is, how much time do we spend searching? Because when we see something available to us that we can buy, let's say you're in a store and you see maybe a loaf of bread or something like that. Now, you could just buy it, maybe you want some bread, but you don't know if that's really the best possible bread available for you. Maybe that exact same brand of bread is available the next store over for $1 cheaper. Maybe there's another brand of bread that you've never tried before that you're going to like a whole lot more, right? You don't know, right? This is an uncertain outcome, and so it's a risky choice, whether to buy the bread or not. Maybe it's a very low stakes risky choice, but it's a risky choice nonetheless. And so we can think about this sort of thing in terms of expected utility. And in particular, the question here really isn't just to buy the bread or not, it's how much time do we spend searching to find the best loaf of bread? Because you can imagine just buying the first loaf of bread that you see. And maybe that's fine. But you're missing out on the opportunity for some better bread that could be out there. That would be bad, right? That'd be a subpar decision on your part. You can also think about spending the rest of your life searching for the perfect loaf of bread. Obviously, that's too much searching. So somewhere in the middle, we're going to figure out how much time we should spend searching for that loaf of bread, or for any other sort of thing that we might be searching for. Because there are always costs associated with finding out information. Right? Information is not free. We have to spend our time doing research. We have to spend materials, right? If you have to drive to a bunch of different stores to look at all the bread, that's going to cost you some gas money. Maybe you have to take some time off work. That would cost you too, right? So there are costs associated with it. And, these search costs show up anytime you have to search for something, and you're searching for a lot of things. Imagine searching for an apartment, right? You don't just walk into the first apartment and say, yep, I'll take it. You want to look at a couple of them and figure out, okay, what kind of prices are out there, what kind of apartment is good for me. Then you get a good idea of what looks right, and then you figure out which one you're going to go with. You can think about looking at colleges, right? You probably searched through a couple different colleges, but you didn't consider all of them. There's like 2,000 colleges in the country. I bet you didn't spend that much time looking at every single one of them, right? And why would you, right? That would simply be the costs of searching would outweigh the potential benefits. It's very unlikely that you're going to go to, say, Bethany College in West Virginia. So why would you spend any time researching that, right? It's unlikely that it's going to bring a benefit to you. The costs outweigh the benefits. You don't do it. Job search is an area where this happens, right? Imagine that you're on the job market. You're hunting for a job. You go for an interview, and you get the offer. You get offered the job. Well, maybe it's not the salary that you really wanted, but then you have a dilemma. Okay, well, you can take this job that's being offered to you, or you can turn it down and keep looking. There's an obvious cost there, right? You're giving up, of course, the time and energy that it takes to search for more jobs, but you're also giving up that job offer that's right there available for you. And you're doing this in the hopes that you will find an even better job. But will you? You don't know. It's a risky choice. And so you're going to have to think about the expected utility of doing so. Now, we have these benefits and we have these costs that are associated with searching. And if only there were some sort of rule that would tell us when we want to stop searching and just sort of go with the information that we have. Some sort of golden rule that would tell us the proper amount to do something. And oh, right, it's marginal cost equals marginal benefit. Okay, so that same rule that applies to all sorts of decision making, of course, applies here as well. You want to keep searching more and more and more until the marginal benefit of searching, the expected utility of what you're likely to learn, is exactly equal to the marginal cost of searching. It's what you have to give up in order to continue searching, both in terms of the search costs and giving up the opportunities that have already been presented to you. Now, the difference here between other applications of marginal benefit equals marginal cost is that in this case, the marginal benefit is uncertain. It's risky. When we go and search for more information, we don't know whether we're going to find anything better. If you go search for another job after being offered one, you don't know if you're going to find a better one. Maybe you already got offered the best job in the area and you just didn't know it, and you gave up the best job in the area. It's possible. These are uncertain things. So let's do a quick example thinking about this in a job search context. So let's say that you are going and searching for a job, and you happen to know with an impressive level of prescience that half of the time you go search for a job, you'll be offered a job that pays $20,000 a year. And the other half of the time you get offered a job that pays $40,000 a year. Now let's say that you get offered a job that pays $20,000 a year. Should you keep looking for a job? Well, in order to answer that question, we would want to compare the marginal cost and marginal benefit. What's the marginal benefit of going and searching again for another job? Well, it's the possibility of getting a better job, of getting that $40,000 job. But we don't know if that's actually going to happen. It's only going to happen half the time. And so in order to figure out what's our marginal benefit of searching more, we would of course use expected utility. What's our marginal cost? Well, it's the time and energy we put into searching, but also it's the fact that we're giving up that $20,000 job offer that we just had. And so in order to figure out whether we're going to search or not, we would compare those two things. Now, if you're having a little bit of trouble wrapping your head around this, thankfully all you need to do is turn on your television, because there is a popular game show that is almost perfectly exactly this search thing that I'm talking about. And that show is Deal or No Deal. And I'll put a link down in the description so that you can watch an example of Deal or No Deal being played. But the basic way that this game is played is this. Right? There's a whole bunch of ladies and they are holding briefcases that contain numbers inside of them. Okay? And the contestant can point to the ladies and say, I want to open that briefcase, and then one at a time, and they will open the briefcase and show the number that's inside. And they can just keep picking briefcases as long as they want. And then the last briefcase, whatever number's in there, that's the prize money. And it could be a penny, it could be $500, it could be $1 million. All right? But you know, you keep opening briefcases. You see somebody open the 5-cent briefcase, you're like, oh, phew, the last briefcase is not going to have 5 cents in it. And you see somebody open the $1 million briefcase, you're like, oh, shoot, the last briefcase is not going to have $1 million in it. And you can keep going until you get to that last briefcase. Okay, so far so good. However, every once in a while, the show will stop. And there'll be a phone call on stage, and the phone call will be the banker, and the banker will say, all right, I will offer you $20,000, $40,000, $15,538 to stop playing. Now think about what this is. This is exactly our search model. It's just like our model where you get offered a job, the banker calls you and gives you an offer to stop searching, and you can either take it, you can take the banker's offer and walk away and not search anymore, or you can think, well, what's the possible outcomes if I keep searching? I know what briefcases are still out there. I know what my potential prizes still might be. I could either take the offer and stop searching, or I could keep opening briefcases in hopes that I will find a better number than I've just been offered. Right? That's exactly how Deal or No Deal works, and it's exactly how the search model works. So just go ahead and watch some TV. I give you permission. In the link, in the video of Deal or No Deal that I had in the example, that person probably searched a little too much, because I can tell you that they ended up with not a whole lot of money at the end. Right? They had offers of $15,000. They could have just had it and they could have walked away, and they said, you know what? I think that there's a good chance that I'll get a better number than that if I keep opening briefcases. So they kept searching and kept searching and kept searching, and they ended up giving up all their good offers and ending up with a really bad number, which is too bad, right? There's such a thing as too much information and too much searching. Sometimes, he was searching beyond the point where marginal cost equals marginal benefit. He kept on searching until marginal cost was greater than marginal benefit, which didn't work out too well for him. Now, this whole idea of search, it applies, of course, in a lot of different situations, like we talked about: apartments, jobs, colleges. Of course, anytime you buy something, right, you shop around for the best price. But that's a search thing as well. How much time do you spend shopping around? Do you take the first price that you see, you don't care, or do you really search hard for the best price? And the fact that we can think about prices as happening in this way, as happening through this search process, can explain something that we haven't been able to explain up to now in this class. And that thing is the fact that you see different prices for the exact same good at different stores. Now think about that. That's something that we see all the time. Here's an example that we have right here. Right? So I looked for this CD at 2 different stores. I looked at Amazon. I looked at Walmart. These are online, shops, of course. And on the left here at Amazon, you can buy it for $10. And on the right, over at Walmart, they sell it for $11.18. Okay. How can they get away with that? How can Walmart possibly expect anybody to buy this CD for $11.18 when they could get it for $1.18 cheaper over at Amazon. And the explanation for why this can happen is because of search, okay? And of course, this differential pricing thing happens all the time, right? You just drive down the street and you notice that the gas prices are different at different gas stations, even though they're pretty close to each other. So it's not really a locational thing, it's a search thing. So what's actually going on here? Well, as a consumer, if you happened to know off the top of your head, if you were omniscient exactly where the cheapest price was, you'd always go to the cheap price store and pay the cheapest price, right? Why not? So there must, in order to explain why there are different prices at different stores, why the more expensive stores can get away with charging more, there has to be some informational friction. There has to be something that you don't know. The people going to that Walmart site and buying that CD must not have known that the cheaper CD was available on Amazon, right? And so, they could, of course, have searched a little bit more. They could have gone to Walmart and they said, okay, it's $11.18. Let me shop around a little. But the question of how much do they shop around, how much effort and time do they put into looking for the best price, of course, we want to follow marginal benefit and marginal cost. So it could be that these people who are looking at the Walmart CD are thinking, you know what, I could probably find a better price somewhere else, but that would take a lot of time and effort. It's not worth it. So I'm just going to go ahead and buy this one. So not everybody's going to spend all the time to search for the lowest price. And in fact, it is rational to not spend the time looking for the lowest price because you know what? You got other things to do with your time. And searching is expensive. You can't treat it as though it's free. You need to realize that you're giving something up when you search for more information. So stores know that people do this. What can we do about it? So stores know that not everybody's going to spend all their time looking for the cheapest price. And so you're going to end up with two different kinds of stores. One of them is going to be the really low price kind of store. They know that some people are going to look for the lowest price and they're going to sell to those people. But then there are other stores who are going to realize that not everybody's going to do that. So they can have a higher price on the hopes that somebody will, buy from them before they have all the information. Right? They hope that they will exhaust the profitable time that people can spend searching before they find any price that's cheaper than theirs. Right, so somebody is going to stop at that Walmart page and they're going to go ahead and buy the more expensive CD, even though the CD's out there. They might even know that Walmart doesn't have the lowest price, but they don't know where the lowest price is. So they might as well buy it at Walmart, right? And so this explains why we can have different prices at different stores, because not everybody knows where the cheapest price actually is. Now, I do want to be clear, this is not price discrimination. Right? Price discrimination is the same store selling at two different prices. Here we have different stores selling at two different prices. This is also not necessarily monopolistic competition. Right? You could make the argument that one reason why Walmart might be more expensive is that people prefer the brand of Walmart or something like that. But we don't actually need that to be part of the explanation. This can pop up in a purely competitive market where we end up with different prices for the same good, on the fact that some stores are going to try to get people to pay more because they don't know where the cheapest price is. Now this, of course, poses a bit of a conundrum to consumers because they want to charge that cheapest price, but they want to pay the cheapest price, but they don't want to spend all their time searching. So if only there were an easier way to figure out the cheapest price. And there comes to the rescue information firms, firms that make it easier for you to search. And there are a lot of these kinds of things. So here's an example. Here's an example of a Travelocity search for a plane ticket. Now, it used to be the case, several decades ago, that if you wanted to find out who had the cheapest plane ticket, you'd have to call up one of the airlines, you'd have to ask them about the date that you're interested in flying, you'd write down the price, you'd call up a different airline, you'd check the price on that one, you'd call a different airline, and it'd be very expensive to search. So you'd be very much willing to pay a higher price so as to not have to go through all that effort of searching, right? Enter something like Travelocity or Kayak or whatever, right, that you just put in and it will do all the searching for you. It lowers the marginal cost of searching, which naturally means that you can do more searching. You can do more comparison searching and you can find the cheapest price for that flight, right? Now, there are lots of other firms like this, where the existence of the firm, all they really provide, they don't make anything, they just link people up. They provide information. They tell you where the cheapest price is, or they tell you, where the seller even is. Right? You might not know where to buy a plane ticket, and yet, Travelocity will tell you, right? They'll tell you exactly how to buy a plane ticket from Alaska. You don't need to look up Alaska's phone number. And there are lots of things like this, right? Craigslist will help, link up buyers and sellers of old couches. eBay will help link up buyers and sellers of old comic books or whatever. Human resources firms, right? It's difficult to spend all that energy trying to figure out who the best people to hire are. And yet, like headhunter firms or talent agencies will find those people for you. They will lower the cost of search, right? And when you lower the cost of search, it means that you can do more searching. Which means that you're going to get better information, and the eventual choice that you're going to make is going to be of higher quality. That's the value that these firms are providing, right? Information firms. They're sort of middlemen who are charging a fee in order to provide this information. This is, in fact, the sort of value of middlemen. If you've ever heard that term, middleman, it's sort of a firm that, again, doesn't provide anything. It just sort of links up the different parts of the market and provides information. Often the term middleman is used to be a little bit disparaging, but economists would say that they are actually producing a valuable service, right? They do exist for a reason, after all, and it is to provide this information. It's to get around this partial information problem. So let's take a quick example of this. Let's say, for example, that you had a real desire to buy a piece of replica human fat. For example, like the one pictured here. Now, you want to buy this replica human fat. Where do you buy replica human fat? I have no clue, right? Maybe some sort of like medical teaching supplier, but who is that? Who does that? Where would you find them? How do you call them? What's their website exactly? So you don't know. So you need someone else to do the searching for you. In order to find out the best, source for human replica fat, it would be a lot of effort on your part. The search costs would be very high. And even then, once you found one, you wouldn't know if the price was any good. So enter a middleman like Amazon, say. So I want to buy the replica human fat. I don't have to do the searching. I just go to Amazon and I tell it I would like some replica human fat, and it does all the searching for me, right? It provides me with the information of where I can buy this 5-pound yellow glob of replica human fat. Now, this is providing a service to me, of course. It lowers the search cost for me of finding the supplier of replica human fat. It also lowers the search cost for the provider of replica human fat as well, right? They want to sell this replica human fat. Well, how do you find your consumer? Well, you could maybe call up some teaching hospitals. They probably need it, or some medical schools, or some biology departments. But they would never find me. They would never guess that I want some replica human fat and call me up on the phone and say, hey, do you want to buy this? And so they don't have to. They just put their thing on Amazon, and I will be able to find them, and they'll be able to find me. And thus the value of Amazon is made clear, which is one reason why they're able to be such a large company. All right, so that's the basics of partial information, right? A lot of decisions that we face have uncertain outcomes. We don't know exactly what's going to happen when we have to make a decision about them. We have to make a decision only based on partial information. Is this lottery ticket a winner or a loser? We don't know yet. We have to make the decision we have to make the decision to buy it or not before we know. We can analyze these sorts of decisions using expected utility, which is pretty straightforward. You just list out all the possible outcomes of this risky decision. You think about the utility, the sort of satisfaction rating of each outcome. You think of the probability of each outcome. You multiply them together. You add it all up, and you're done. That gives you the value, the expected utility, of that risky option available to you. One way in which this sort of risky stuff pops up all the time is in search, is in trying to decide, okay, how much time do we spend searching for more information about something that we are interested in buying? This, of course, pops up all the time, searching for a best apartment that you might want to rent, searching for a job that you might want to take. If you're an employer, searching for an employee that you might want to hire. Lots of different situations. And the decision of how much information do we want to gain is, of course, determined by marginal cost equal marginal benefit, although the marginal benefit is uncertain. We would need to think about it using expected utility. And, of course, this is something that we'll be doing in the example worksheet that you have available to you. Finally, given that we have this search problem, there are, of course, firms out there that solve it a little bit for us, right? That make the searching process easier, and that is the value that they provide. These are information firms. What they do is they provide information. They either link you up with a lot of information, making it easy for you to find what the best price is. Or they can link you up to the market in general. You might not even know where to buy that replica human fat, and Amazon will show you. Or if you want to sell it, they will show you where their consumers are. There's a lot of stuff that partial information applies to. It, of course, applies to most of the decisions in our lives. When are we really completely certain about the potential outcome of our decisions? And we need to think about these things in terms of expected utility. It's a very powerful tool. All right. So that's it for partial information where we don't know what our outcomes are going to be. Next time we'll talk about asymmetric information, which is a situation where one person knows something and the other does not, which has a whole bunch of interesting consequences all its own. All right. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.